Welcome back to the channel. I'm attira.kell and this is A Soldier's Opinion. This is the video series where I apply my 21 years of military experience to evaluate the vehicles and mechanics for military professions and activities within Star Citizen. Today we're going to take a look at the Tumbril Storm, CIG's newest entry for tanks. Now, very important, this is a concept sale, which means you are effectively buying a picture right now. You're buying an idea. We don't know how it will perform in game, and we don't know when it will release. Now, before we jump into the Storm, I want to talk about what a light tank is, because the Storm is supposed to be a light tank. Now, we can certainly argue the finer points on this, but in general, a light tank is much lighter than a main battle tank, smaller in all dimensions, and carries a single-shot main gun. In other words, a cannon main gun. They also typically have a much smaller logistical footprint than a main battle tank. But why is this important? Because light tanks exist to be deployed rapidly into austere environments. They typically are expected to delay more than stop an enemy advance until larger, heavier systems can be brought to bear to fix and finish the enemy. With that framework in mind, let's talk about the dimensions and weight for the US's newest vehicle, the Griffin II, which should go into production over the next 5 years. Length is about 9 meters, including the gun, which is of course important, which is why the Nova's gun retracts. The hull is 6 meters long, the width is about 2.7 meters, and the height is 2.3 meters. And its weight is about 34.5 tons, which is quite light. It also has a nice 105mm rifled cannon main gun. Now, there are not many light tanks out there in the world at present, but I'll just say that China has also developed the Type 15 for their army, and the dimensions are actually very similar to what the United States is fielding. Alright, so with this core bit of information, let's start talking about the Storm. CIG bills the Storm as the unstoppable force of nature. The top card on the website tells us, blitz overcrowded battlefields and wipe out enemy artillery. The original Storm solo tank was a revelation back in 2606, turning the tides of countless conflicts in the Second Tavaran War. Now, in 2953, Tumbril Land Systems is revolutionizing battlefield dominance and harnessing the force of the unstoppable Squall once more. Faster, stronger, and more impactful than ever, the reimagined Storm is a true force of nature. Alright. Pretty good advertising here. CIG describes this tank as an artillery hunter, meaning that it can quickly penetrate behind enemy lines in order to attack systems such as artillery in the rear area, what we today call the support area. An interesting concept, and I hope this means that CIG is getting serious about putting indirect fires into the game, as they now have a self-proclaimed counter. But now let's dig into this a bit. The spec sheet calls this tank a light tank. Now, I disagree, but we'll get to that a bit later. It is a single-seat tank, which is going to be a lot of fun, I think. And they said in the ISC that it will feel like you are being swallowed when you get into this thing. Now, the actual brochure slash the site, right, doesn't give us much more than the dimensions and weapon. So let's hit that real quick. 3.6 meters in height, okay. 10.5 meters long, so only 1.5 meters longer than an actual light tank. Okay. 7.5 meters wide. Holy crap. And we also get a bespoke S3 repeater for the main weapon. Okay. So compared to the Nova, the Storm is shorter in both height and length, which is great. But it is 0.5 meter wider. So immediately I see issues with transportability and deployability. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's dig into the spec sheet. It has 2 size 1 fuel tanks, which is pretty interesting. I don't have the spec sheet for the Nova to say if that's more or less, but I'm going to assume less because as I look at the Nova store page, it has quite a few backup components in it that the Storm does not. And I think that that is certainly appropriate. Life support, power plant, coolers, batteries, and that's new, computers and radar are all size 0, and there is only 1 per vehicle, which again is very appropriate for the idea of a light tank, not a lot of redundancies. So I think that's right on point. So all in all, when we look at the spec sheet, it is less capable than a Nova, as it should be, with a smaller crew requirement, as it should be, and I'll say a slightly less deployability issue, which is as it should be, but it could be way, way better. Now, we haven't talked design yet, and I'll say that I like it. It takes a lot of inspiration from anime and apparently Batman, but you know what? It's awesome to look at. So that's all I'm going to say on that. I do, however, have a couple of concerns on performance, which I think you can probably already guess. We already touched on this a bit, but transportability deployability is still a real issue for the Storm. And as I look at the model, I see all kinds of extra shape language that is unnecessary that could have helped to reduce the width. I think our only hope here is that this thing fits in a Valkyrie so that we do not have to rely on the C2, M2, A2 pirates in the verse to move these things around. So to kind of highlight my point, I just want to pop a couple of graphics up that I found in about 30 seconds of searching on the internet. You can see here German tanks of World War II. Germany is a great example in this case because they manufactured so many different types of tanks during the war. You can see the size difference of the tanks as compared to the little human outline. Now, I know that CIG makes all of their vehicles a bit bigger than real life, but proportionally, they need to stay about the same as some of these graphics depict. I'll say it and I'll keep saying it. Armored combat vehicles that are small enough to fit in a Connie. That would be a good mark on the wall for light combat vehicles, whether they be a tank, infantry fighting vehicle, mortar carrier, or a recon vehicle. Now, for my second critique, I'll just say that the Storm is a little bit undergunned, even for a light tank. Both the new US light tank and the Chinese Type 15 have a 105mm cannon. The M1A2 main battle tank has a 120mm main gun. That's not a big difference really when it comes down to it. The weapon we have been provided with, the size 3 repeater, is more in line with an infantry fighting vehicle with regard to both size and functionality. Now, John Crew did say in the most recent ISC that it is a double barrel size 3 cannon, but for now, we'll follow the spec sheet that calls it a repeater. So now that I've offered my critique, how would I fix it? Well, I gotta say, I wouldn't actually change much. It's an awesome design that will be fun to play. I would really only do two things. First, recategorize the Storm. Call it a medium tank. Just swallow your pride and do it. It's more or less sized as a medium tank, especially when you take into account the width. Second, upgun this bad boy to a size 4 energy cannon. I know that in the recent ISC, Tom Hutton offered his opinion that you don't always need a large cannon for every problem, and I won't argue here that he's wrong in concept. All I'll say is that tanks, including light tanks, most often have a larger single-round cannon as their main gun, not belt or clip-fed autoguns. And so I think CIG should adjust to fit that mold, and then give us a sexy repeater for an appropriately sized infantry fighting vehicle in the future. And that's it. That's really it. The Storm looks amazing, and I imagine once we have it in game, it will quite literally drive circles around the Nova and the Atlas chassis vehicles, as it should. Make those two little tweaks, CIG, and I think you would have a nearly perfect little tank here. So then the question remains, will I buy it? Well, I'm not sure. I'm waiting on the Q&A to see if they will answer the question of will it fit in a Valk. If so, I'll probably pick one up, because I do think this will be a fun ground vehicle. But if not, I likely won't. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Storm and light tanks in general. As you can imagine, the Storm sparked a lot of conversation in a.m.m.o, and Salty Cactus started playing around in Midjourney to find a version of a light tank that he likes. So here that is. Also this, he likes artillery. And with that, don't forget to like and subscribe. Come check out a.m.m.o if you're looking to play some Star Citizen, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!
With courage, for honor, in strength.